As we approach the crossroads of our 60th birthday or even beyond, it's exciting to know that we have more choices than ever before. This is a time when many of us take stock of our lives and contemplate what we are doing with our life and in our work. This is a momentous rite of passage. You will remember some of your other rites of passage. This one's powerful because we have the experience to be able to make great choices for ourselves. What we can do differently this year to harness that power for positive transformation is something that we're going to talk about today with my guest, Jill Whittington. Jill's philosophy and coaching focuses on energy for impact as opposed to how many birthdays we actually have had. Jill lives in the UK near the historic Georgian city of Bath. She continually inspired by her love of walking in the surrounding countryside. I can just imagine how beautiful it is. And by her two young grandsons where curiosity, fun, and living in the moment are authentically second nature. In our conversation today, Jill and I will explore the power you have to choose and set up a challenge to consider what will be different for you this year and what direction will you take after the age of 60. Hello, Jill. How are you doing today?
Hi, Patricia. I'm well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited about doing this chat with you.
This is always a pleasure for me. Yes. So, Jill, explain to us what led you to be doing the work that you do today when you could have traditionally retired.
Yes, I know. Funnily enough, I don't know whether it's because I was a child growing up in the 60s and I had more curiosity and more freedom to explore new things. I don't know. I do look back on it, but to be absolutely honest, I've never really thought about retirement. It's never been in my vocabulary. Again, I don't know when it stems from when I started work and I was, as a young teenager, went to retirement dues where people who look terribly old were given gold watches, and I thought, I don't want to be doing that. So whether that ingrains something fundamentally in me, I don't know. But I've always I don't think I like artificial constraints. Therefore, I've just really thought about transitions rather than, a retirement. And I don't know about you or anyone else who's listening, but sometimes if I have to fill a form in, I have to think, how old? And when I write it down and I don't want to look at it because it reminds me. So, I really have not, what I've done is followed my passion really, and understood times when perhaps I'm not fulfilled or something. So I haven't had a major life event to trigger anything specific in not retiring or doing different things. I mean, in a traditional sense, I left the corporate world almost after 25 years plus in the corporate world in my sort of early 40s. So that would have been traditional retirement. And then it's just been a wonderful adventure ever since. And so for me, it's maintaining that sense of curiosity, wonder, opportunity. And I think every age has its benefits and its drawbacks, and it's going with that flow and tapping into the benefits and just acknowledging some of the drawbacks and working with it. I saw a lovely quote the other day, which was so pertinent to what we're talking about. It says, "Don't worry about getting old, worry about thinking old."
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Some good quotes coming out. I hope people are as interested in those type of quotes that we are naturally, because yes, I found it interesting when you talked about the constraint and not having an event in your life other than in your 40s that would sort of send you off in a certain direction as far as exploring your passion and purpose. Can you explain, or can you think about if it hadn't hadn't been in your 40s, if it had been later, do you think it would have been a completely different experience?
Ooh, that's a good question. I guess it would have been different because I would have been at a different age and a different stage. But on the other hand, I don't know. I think sometimes, I mean, events were different in my 40s, and
Mhm.
our daughter was, she was then just, finishing university or going to university, and so there was an element of, you know, of freedom for me in terms of what I did. I'd always worked. In fact, one of the key things for me in my generation is when I went back to work after having Becky, it was the first time there was a choice to do it, and
Oh, okay.
it was awful because it just was not an accepted thing to do, and I faced a lot of prejudice and a lot of everything. There were so many barriers to doing that. And I
Mhm.
always said I'd do it on the basis of if it works, fine. If it doesn't, I'd stop. But
Mhm.
luckily, it did work, and I had a very supportive family around me to help enable that. So
Mhm.
I think by the time I got to my 40s, I was just ready for that next stage because by the very nature of working, there had been some constraints, but then I felt
Mhm.
that that was the right time to start pursuing some other things that I wanted to do. So
Yeah.
it's a difficult question to answer, Patricia. I don't know if it would have
Well,
been different if I was
the
older.
reason the reason why I thought about when you said that, like it was in your 40s, because I get a lot of people come to me and say, "Well, I'm not anywhere near 60, so why
Mm,
would I be looking at my passion or purpose after 60?"
mm,
And through my work, like a lot of people who were coming my way through a formal program for preparing for, say, after their corporate life, they were 45.
mm.
And so it still surprises me when people say, well, I'll think about that when I am 60. And I think,
Yeah.
those 15 or even those 20 years before 60 can go by very quickly.
Mm, mm.
And if you're fortunate or not fortunate to have an event that triggers the thought around for you to explore fulfillment, then you're just going on your merry way. And you could get, say, in corporate life, that package around the age of 60 where, and you've done no preparation for that.
Mm.
And so that's why I asked that question, because I remember in my 40s, like I call that my great decade. Like there were a lot of changes, a lot of events changed, but I think in that decade we have enough wisdom and knowledge to
Yeah.
really catapult into another area.
Yeah.
Whereas if we've been in corporate right up until our 60s and not explored
Yeah.
passion or purpose outside of that constraint, that role, right?
Yeah.
Then it can be quite a shock. And I find that's where some people are really lost at that point.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I appreciate that you were willing to explore
Yeah.
that with me.
Yeah, I am noticing, and then within my peer group and other people I know, that they are making transitions earlier than 60 now. I think it's gone through another wave, and I think the pandemic also served to highlight to
Oh,
people what was important. So I think that has also triggered a shift in people's thinking, and also the way of working. Who'd have thought we'd be having a conversation across the pond? No, that it truly is global and so flexible. So I do think that's contributed hugely to people thinking about what they want to do.
yeah, we see that a lot in our work, right? Where they may not have had the event before, but everyone had the event of the pandemic. Everyone was affected
Yeah,
by the pandemic.
yeah,
And so it did one of the, if you could say, benefits of it, for many people who were really rushing through their career, doing very well, but with blinders on, it did give them the opportunity to see there is a different way of working, and I think that has really just toppled everything into,
Mm.
you know, I've listened to some people where even the younger generations are saying, you know, grandma, when I start working, I'm going to work from home. I'm not going
Yeah,
to go to
yeah,
a workplace. So, my goodness, like the different generations, they're already looking at this is how they're going to
yeah,
work. And they're not
yeah,
going to it unless it's the type of work where you have to
yeah,
be there.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you for exploring that with me. That was something that you and I had not really talked about before, but
No,
it was
no.
good to think about. So, what I wanted to find out from you is like, you call yourself an influencer, but it's in a different way than society understands it, what we've seen as an influencer. How is that different?
Um, yeah, I believe in any kind of coaching or supporting people, we are influencing, but I think there's grown up now a modern kind of connotation of influencer,
Mm,
which is influencing to maybe a set agenda or a thing, or you know, whatever it is. Whereas I would describe myself as, you know, I want to influence people to bring out what they want to, their agenda, as
mm,
opposed to an agenda that's set. And I also believe there's an element of a different use of the ego in that. I don't want people to be me. I want people to be them,
yeah, yeah. Mhm,
and and influencing in the way that I think you and I would know now and love, and the way we work. It's really bringing out. I just fundamentally believe everybody has their innate skills and talents. Just sometimes they've just gone untapped, or you know, they're not on show, or they want to live a better life in some way, shape, or form. And for me, it's then influencing them to think differently, become more curious, and then generating and making active choices for themselves as to what they want to do and how they want to do it, as
mhm,
opposed to you have to do it this way or that way, or you know, I don't prescribe to doing anything to a set way, but rather bring out, you know, people enabling sort of conscious choice. Really, I think sometimes people are influenced into something almost as a fashion, as
mhm,
opposed to a conscious choice, or you know, a
mhm,
discernment around that. So I don't know
mhm.
whether you've come across that concept in the work you do.
Well, that's interesting to explore because you were saying about like what I find is women entrepreneurs in particular are saying to me, nearly every one of them says this to me in my intake interview. So I don't want to lead the way it's been leadership has been defined in the past. I want to do it differently. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think in our role is they don't quite understand. They know they want to do it differently, but they don't know how to pull their wisdom. And you talk about the innate wisdom to make some choices about changing things so that they're not following an agenda that has been, and I think this is very obvious if they are in a corporate world and moving out of the corporate world, they have worked to an agenda
yeah, yeah,
and they haven't had much room to explore their skills. Their skills have been channeled into whatever the corporate would benefit from and into that
yeah,
agenda,
yeah,
right? So now they have this huge freedom, if they choose to explore their wisdom, and they just need our help to channel that. I guess
yeah,
that's what I'm trying to describe. And so that's how you or I would influence them to take a look at what their agenda is,
yeah,
because they
yeah.
might not know what it is.
No, no, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think that's how I differentiate the two, you know, because I think the society currently is quite influencer driven, but it's almost providing answers before people have even thought about what questions they have, or what curiosity they have, or what possibilities there are. Um, and you know, I'm not, that could be very beneficial. I'm not decrying it, but you know, my purpose and my passion is, as you say, to help people generate what do they want to be curious about, and what what possibilities could there be. So that's how I'd differentiate it. And influencing, I mean, we're influencing people all the time, one another, without knowing it. And leadership for me is about role modeling, and really being authentic. I mean, I think role modeling, I remember when I first started on some of my leadership journeys, I thought, oh, I want to be like that person. And at one time there was quite a fashion to almost step into somebody's shoes and imagine you were somebody. And that never sat with me very comfortably. So I soon kind of discarded that. So I think that's maybe what how I differentiate the two.
A couple of very interesting points there. I know you and I have a similar background through going through leadership programs and through quality programs in business and things like that. And when I look back now at those models for leadership, I thought they won't work now. They just don't work. Even before the pandemic, I was getting that. I was saying to people, some of the I don't know how to describe it, but some of the revered programs, when I looked at them, I thought, that doesn't work today, right? That's not who we are today in business. So I find that to be a very important thing to consider if you want to do it differently. And the other thing, Jill, is that if you're doing it differently and doing it according to your own agenda, I think that will take away some of this comparison issue. Because if you really want to be true to yourself and look at how you want to lead, then you're not comparing. You might use some models to help you structure your own leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I do think that's part of the wisdom we have with age, of being comfortable in our own shoes, and being comfortable with who we are, and confident with using that as a differentiator and a strength. And I can think back to when I was going through and feeling not confident, and almost some of those other tools and props sort of worked to an extent.
Yes.
Yeah, but certainly I very quickly didn't feel comfortable with it. So, and it's back to that constraints again. I don't like something to a set agenda. And of course, we're talking about women here, and at the time you and I started work, it was quite challenging for us in the business world. So, and I've never ever felt comfortable with trying to be the best sort of bloke in, trying to do things the way in a more masculine way. I've always I almost never really subscribed to feminism, because to me that ended up almost creating something that certainly didn't help me. I just wanted to be authentic and doing the work, the job, whatever it is, well, and then seeking opportunities from there.
Now, we talked about some models, but you have a couple of tools that you use. Could you tell us a little more about those tools that you use to help you in your work?
Yeah, sure. It's quite interesting, the story, because I've always, like you, I've come through a total quality management background and process and all the rest, and the power of the process and all of those amazingly good things, which I think, going back to what we talked about earlier, there's still some huge nuggets of wisdom and value in those, but just applying them differently. But I've always, right from early days, and when I managed my first team or my first department, my first area, I've always believed that the people are at the heart of it. And I know the models about the individual, the team, and the organisation, but I've always believed that, and I've always believed very deep down that if an individual is giving at their best, then the team will function, and therefore the organisation will function. So there were two, and I've, like you, used many different tools and been through many different psychometrics. But for me, there was always a bit of a so what? Well, okay, that might be my personality. How do I translate that, and what does it mean? And there always seemed to be something in the middle that was a grey area. Well, again, very recently, and this is the great thing about getting older, you're continually learning and continually stumbling across new things. Two things that became prominent for me within literally the last 5 years. One is something called the GC profile, the GC index, which is a type of psychometric, but it's more organometric, which is looking at your energy for impact. And that really resonated with me, given what I'd said earlier about the fact that, I go with energy, not age. Where do I feel in the zone where it doesn't feel like work? I'm loving it. I'm enjoying it. I could do it all day, all night. That's what I describe as being in the zone. And that's what the GC index looks at. It looks at 5 proclivities, they're called, so areas. One is a game changer, who, the person who comes up with original creative ideas, the strategist, the person who makes sense of it and turns it, those ideas, those crazy ideas, into some way of working, the implementer, who will make sure they're delivered, the polisher, who makes things as best they possibly could be, which obviously resonates with our TQM background, and then the playmaker, who brings everybody together. And the thing that I love about this is that you automatically have a very grounded business conversation, no matter what you're using it for: team development, strategic development, recruitment, HR. It has so many applications. And it's regardless of any kind of bias of the individual, because it just looks, what's the impact that this individual brings? Then when you look at that at a team level, it's so powerful because, for example, we're looking at a team recently that had high amount of implementers and polishers, very little in the way of innovator, and very little in the way of strategist. So, it kind of smacks of an organisation or team being told, this is what you do it, and make sure it's really good, and being measured to. So that's just and there was no translation needed, and it's regardless of skills, experience, qualifications, anything like that, and it's just so powerful. Now, when I did my profile, I came out as my 2 highest proclivities as a game changer strategist. And then I went, now I can see all those points throughout my career when I had a crazy idea and everybody looked at me as though I'd just come from another planet. Because what I learned I learned the hard way is how to get ideas accepted and things. But with this, obviously, you see that one needs to develop ways and mechanisms and other people around you to get ideas coming to fruition. But also, interestingly, my proclivities were really low for playmaker, bringing people together, and polisher. Yet part of what I was renowned for was bringing people together and, the whole quality element. But the fact was, and again, when I had this aha moment when I went through this, is the fact that I could do that and I could do it really well, but it absolutely drained me of my energy.
Yes.
I can remember coming home from work, oh gosh, and a lot of that had been to do with the energy I'd needed to make that happen. Whereas when I was in an ideas zone, I just came home buzzing and full of energy, light, because I was in my zone. So it's absolutely fascinated me that it's taken all these years for me to marry up with this particular tool. And during the pandemic, I did that, and I qualified to be an accredited, we call it a GCologist, to actually use and practice with it. So that's the one tool. And then the other one, which is something called Mind Chi, which probably sounds quite unusual, but again, linked to the fact that I've always passionately believed about people being of their best. And over the years, I'd done so many things around well-being and what helps well-being, both in terms of the physical and emotional and mental, and for vehemently believing and that your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual self are all part of your being.
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
anyone is out of kilter, then you won't be of your best.
Mhm.
So I've always been on this quest and I've practiced and done various things like yoga, Pilates, breathing, you name it. But what struck me with everything like that is that, especially now, people are time poor, and it's also, how does that relate and how does that integrate into your busy daily working life? So roll forward, literally just about 5 years ago, I was at an event and I bumped into, I was introduced to a wonderful lady called Vanda North, who I think you've recently connected with, and hopefully
Mhm.
do one of
Yeah.
these chats with you. Totally inspirational lady whose purpose is just to bring joy to people in their life. She'd gone through a similar path to me in her working life, and was continued to be worried about the amount of stress in the workplace and stress in life generally, and also realizing that it's not getting any better. If anything, it's getting worse.
Yeah.
She created with a colleague of hers a Mind Chi, which is literally using the power of your brain and that little mental chi in your head to help you rather than hinder you. That voice in your head,
Okay.
to help you rather than hinder you. So it's
Mhm.
just your mental energy, really. And obviously Tai Chi is your energy, and Chi is used in that sense for energy. In Mind Chi,
Yeah.
it's the power of and the energy of your mind and your brain. So
Mhm.
Mind Chi is an 8-minute sequence of 8 individual steps, which helps to retrain and rewire your brain to do things that actually help you.
Mhm.
It's really powerful. And I said when we were chatting earlier, I've had quite a busy day, but one of the things I did today was ran a Mind Chi session for a group of 12 people. And it was just so wonderful, so heartwarming to see how they were at the beginning and how they were at the end, and how excited they were about having some real practical, in the moment tools and steps and techniques to help them. So,
Mhm.
so those two things together. And the other thing about Mind Chi is you can also use it. So any kind of learning one has from something like the GC Index, any personal development improvements or business technique improvements, we can use Mind Chi in a way that focuses on that particular thing you want to develop.
Oh, okay.
So, it's very powerful, and it has many different uses. So
Mhm.
they're the two tools. So no doubt you have a few questions to probe me a bit further on these.
Well, I would imagine people would like to contact you and
Yeah,
probe you a little on this.
yeah,
I did have one question that I had asked you before, and especially when you were talking about being an influencer in a different way now. Um, some of the tools that you're talking about do not fit in the old models, right?
no,
And so it's almost like we've come to this point of liberation where we can use these tools and hopefully influence other people to appreciate them. So my question is um, are you finding people are more receptive now to things like Mind Chi?
yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Again, I do think the pandemic accelerated that acceptance, because I know, Vanda and myself and others, we helped support different teams through the people who had to keep on working, key workers, with using Mind Chi to manage their stress and their anxiety. But stress itself, now the conversation about stress, depression, and burnout is much more acceptable. People are much more receptive now, I think, of finding ways of preventing burnout and seeing it as a different thing. I mean, I know, I expect you're the same, going through your career. It was very frowned upon if you were ill, if you had if you were off sick, and there was this kind of hidden agenda that you'd get on if you were shown to be showing up and sort of gritting your teeth and just going through it. Talking about any vulnerability just wasn't on the agenda. Otherwise, I think certainly my experience is you were kind of sidelined a little bit because you weren't considered to be up to it. Whereas at least the conversation is out there now. I think there has been a slight danger that resilience is, in some instances, being almost used as a sort of almost back in that old paradigm of, well, let's be resilient and carry on, without really understanding what being resilient means. Because we, in Mind Chi, we talk about the stress strain. I mean, it comes from an engineering term. If the the platform upon which stressors are happening is robust, then it takes a lot to shatter it. But if it's it gets to a point where the load is so great, then that strain will just give way.
Pull it away.
So I do think people are much more receptive now, and the beauty of something like Mind Chi, it's very simple. It's in the moment. You don't have to spend a week on a course, or you don't have to go in a darkened room, or take an hour out of your busy day to do something. And it's very relevant to what you're doing, as opposed to something being, as these things have always been described, alternative. It's not an alternative. To me, it's a fundamental.
That's very interesting. All of what you've said about some of the words and the models that we've used in the past too. They sounded good, but it was still that old paradigm of, I actually had a young woman ask me the other day about, like, is it always going to be like this? I put the responsibility on her and her generation. I said, it's up to you to change it. Like, we're giving you this great wisdom. Please change it, right?
Yeah.
We did struggle through those changes. We had to fit in certain ways. We had to carry certain loads that really were fracturing for ourselves, for our well-being. And some of us had some wake-up calls because of the amount of stress. And so I'm truly hoping that the younger generations that have gone through COVID, like the pandemic, with all of us, see that what was happening before was not normal. Like when people say, let's get back to normal, I say, what was so normal about that, right? So I think a lot of these things, I'm so glad to hear that people are embracing them. Of course, they will be the true leaders, the authentic leaders that say, okay, this is something we need to take a look at, right? To help ourselves, help our people. And I have to go back to when we're talking about processes. I remember when we used to talk about trust the process, and we still do. I now am more an advocate of trust yourself. Build your self-trust. Even in building processes, there still needs to be some regard for yourself. Like, I think when people start to talk about other language that we've heard, such as the imposter syndrome, I speak to women about that when they bring it up. I say, one way you can crack that is to build trust in yourself. Then you know that you're doing well for yourself. The imposter comes in is when you're trying to meet someone else's standards. And even that comparison, all those dysfunctional things, comparison will be in it too. So this would be a very long conversation, but I'd like to ask you about, when was a pivotal moment for you when you realized what fulfillment was for you?
For me, it's not necessarily one pivotal moment, but maybe moments when I realized I wasn't fulfilled. I can't pinpoint one pivotal. I mean, there have been certainly I can think of 4 very influential leaders who had a big impact on me, who allowed me to be myself, who allowed me freedom to try things. And so they were pivotal moments, and I, I'm just truly blessed to have worked with those people who trusted me to trust myself, just to try things, almost keep the heat off of what we were trying to do, because they felt it would work, and that, so that they were pivotal moments, those times I worked with those people. But also, and it maybe harks back to what I was saying about my proclivities. I've looked back once I knew what my profile was, because every time I became unfulfilled, I know now that my profile is, I love getting out, I love new things, setting them up, getting them going. I wane once it becomes business as usual, and doing the same. So a lot of my pivotal moments have been when I thought, well, actually, I'm just not energized by this anymore. And therefore, that has also, again, looking back, I've realized I was then seeking out opportunities or just creating them. I thought, well, what should we try now? Which sometimes was a good thing, but sometimes maybe not so good. I have, I would say for a good high percentage of my career, I've actually made opportunities for what I ended up doing, as opposed to following a mapped out career path. So I guess that's just been intrinsic in my nature. Obviously, there are other influences I've seen and had around me, people who have had pivotal moments with their health or big life events, which have just served to remind me that, we're only, this is not a rehearsal, we're here. And it's just reinforced my passion to help people be their very best they can be. You introduced me and mentioned my darling little grandsons in the thing, but that is that was a pivotal moment, because we go back to purpose. The only purpose of a child is to be a child, and it's just, you just learn so much more from them. So that's another pivotal moment, because that means I'm wearing a different hat that I haven't worn up until 6 years ago. So it's so there's this kind of ripple of pivotal moments, I described it, as opposed to a big life-changing pivotal moment. Yeah.
Well, I think it's important for us to look back and think of some of those pivotal moments. They may not have felt so pivotal at that time, but yes, when you were talking about some of the people who sort of opened the crack of the door a little bit for you, and you made the opportunity. Yeah, that's pivotal, right? And so the importance of having people around you like that. I can't say enough about that, whether you're face to face or whether, the way we network now is very different, but just having those people in your circle of people that you can be influenced by in a positive way.
And I think it influenced as a byproduct, and it almost goes back to the the influence, the role of influence. So we mentioned earlier in the conversation, it's almost not trying too hard, not to, this is how this, I want to influence you in this way, but it's really, us being authentic to allow others to be authentic. And as you say, unlocking those pivotal moments and that pivotal curiosity. Because I also believe that people come into our paths and cross our paths and want our help at a time when they need it. It's almost, I think earlier on, I was more trying to not force, but almost try to get people to want to be interested in something. But what I've learned is people will come to you, ask you something you say or resonate with them, and say, "Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? And can we explore that more?" So that is something that I think is the benefit of age and wisdom as well.
For sure. So, Jill, I'm sure anyone who's listening will want to be in touch with you somehow. Could you let our audience know how they can reach you? And if you have something that you'd like to call them to, like ask them to act on something, please do that.
Okay, well, yeah, I can be contacted if you go to thechangemakergroup.com. You'll be able to access me that way, or www.mindchi.com.
Okay.
They're the two mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
And call to action. I'd like people to really consider what is their passion and purpose, and are they living it right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that is so fundamental to everything we do. And I
And
think it's just a great way to, I know we're, sort of 2 weeks into January already, but, and it's, many people make resolutions. I don't, I'm more think about possibilities, and I guess I'm more value goals driven rather than goal driven, if you know what I mean. But it's visiting your purpose and what you're passionate about, and is there enough of that in your life? That would be my call to action for people to contemplate.
It's a good question. Is there enough of it in your life? Yeah, I like that, Jill. Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I think we've covered an awful lot of ground today.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to thank you very much for inviting me, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure. And the information that you shared as far as links and how people can reach you, they will actually be in the notes. So for our audience, please go into the notes and pick up the links that where you can contact Jill. And I wish you all the best in finding something that Jill can help you with, because I'm sure there's a lot that she can help you with, especially as we set a new course for fulfillment. And so we can be awesome at any age. Jill talked about being in her 40s, even preparing in your 40s for how awesome you're going to be in your 60s and 70s, and whatever that looks like for you. Thank you to all my followers and to Jill's followers as well. Join me each week as I interview women like Jill and other thought leaders, some men, who talk about finding fulfillment and joy in their lives, especially after the age of 60. If you're interested in being a guest on this particular podcast, please reach out to me, and you can visit my website at patriciamuir.com and read the Encore Weekly blog at patriciamuir.com/blog, and subscribe to my newsletter. Sunday mornings are all about self-care, and hundreds of women sit with their favorite beverage to read my latest insights on fulfillment in life and work. I often refer to my guests' insights. Jill's insights will be in there this Sunday because we appreciate all the wisdom that we can share. Thank you and have a wonderful day.